While I was taking a shower, my daughter brought a strange man home and threw away my clothes. As a result, my name is Margaret Hensley, and the day my daughter stripped me of my dignity began in the most ordinary way imaginable under the warm spray of my own shower. I remember the steam filling the bathroom, the sound of water drumming against porcelain, the faint smell of lavender soap that always helped calm me. At 54, little routines had become my anchor. A quiet shower in the morning, a cup of tea, reading on the porch. Life hadn't been easy, but I had carved out small comforts that were mine alone. That morning, however, those comforts were stolen from me, in a way I never could have imagined. When I turned off the water and reached for my towel, I noticed something strange. The robe I had left on the hook was gone. My folded clothes, which I had set neatly on the chair, had vanished. For a moment, I thought I had misplaced them. I searched every corner of the bathroom. Nothing. A cold panic rose in me. I called out, "Emily, did you move my clothes?" No answer. Just the faint sound of laughter, not her light-hearted laugh, but sharp, careless, echoing from the living room. And then, a man's voice. I froze. I gripped the towel tightly around me, the only barrier left, and stepped into the hallway. The air outside the bathroom felt freezing against my damp skin. My bare feet stuck to the hardwood floor as I moved slowly toward the voices. Each step carried both dread and disbelief. When I reached the living room, my heart nearly stopped. There he was, a man I had never seen before, sprawled on the couch as though he owned it, sipping from a can of beer. My daughter Emily sat beside him, smirking at me. At me, her mother, shivering in nothing but a towel. "What's going on here?" My voice trembled, not from fear but from humiliation. Emily crossed her legs casually and said, "Relax, Mom. This is Tyler. Get used to him, he's going to be around a lot." I blinked, trying to make sense of it. "Where are my clothes?" Her smirk widened into something cruel. She pointed toward the garbage bag by the door. "Oh, those? I threw them out. They were old anyway. You should be grateful." The man Tyler chuckled. He didn't even look at me, just leaned back and took another sip. The sound of the can, crumpling in his hand, was like a hammer striking my chest. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The indignity of it, standing there half naked, stripped not only of clothing, but of respect, while my own daughter watched, made my cheeks burn. I clenched my jaw and whispered, "Emily, how could you do this to me?" She shrugged. "Don't be so dramatic. You act like the world's ending because you lost a few rags. You'll live." Her words cut deeper than any blade. They weren't just about the clothes. They were about me. About every sacrifice I had made. Every sleepless night. Every penny saved to raise her. To hear her dismiss me so easily, in front of a stranger, was more humiliating than my nakedness. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and demand answers. But all I did was stand there, clutching that towel as though it were the last shred of my dignity. Tyler finally turned his eyes toward me. They were cold, assessing. He gave me a look that wasn't just disrespectful, it was ownership, as though I were the intruder here, in my own home. That look chilled me more than anything Emily said. In that moment, I realized something was unraveling in my daughter that I hadn't wanted to see before. This wasn't rebellion or youthful arrogance. This was contempt. Deliberate, cruel contempt. And the man beside her was feeding it. I retreated back toward my bedroom, every step heavy with humiliation. I locked the door behind me, pressing my forehead against the wood, willing myself not to break down. My chest rose and fell rapidly, my towel still clinging to my damp skin. What had just happened wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a declaration. Emily wasn't just bringing home a man. She was throwing me out of my own life, piece by piece, dignity by dignity. And I knew, with a sudden clarity that made my stomach churn, that this was only the beginning. I wish I could tell you that I burst out of my bedroom that day, demanded my clothes back, and put an end to the humiliation right there. But the truth is, I didn't. I sat on the edge of my bed, towel still damp against my skin, staring at the floor, trying to breathe through the shame. My daughter had looked me straight in the eye and stripped me of my dignity, and worse, she had laughed while doing it. After a few minutes, I forced myself to open my closet. I found an old dress, wrinkled from disuse, and slipped it on. My hands trembled as I buttoned it. I could hear them laughing in the living room, the sound carrying through the thin walls like knives scraping across glass. When I finally walked back out, Tyler glanced up at me and smirked. He didn't even bother to move his feet from the coffee table. Emily leaned into him, as if I were some intruder disturbing their peace. "You found something to wear," she said dryly. "Good for you." Her tone wasn't playful. It wasn't careless. It was cruel. "Emily," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "You had no right to throw away my clothes. Those were mine." She rolled her eyes. "Mom, you act like I burned your wedding dress or something." They were ugly, outdated rags. Tyler and I agreed you needed a new look anyway. Tyler chuckled at that, his eyes fixed on the television, as if I weren't even worth facing directly. The insult stung more, because of his indifference. To him, I was nothing, just some nuisance who happened to live in the house he wanted to claim. "Emily," I whispered again, my voice breaking. "How could you do this to me? I am your mother." That's when she laughed. A sharp, hollow sound that made my skin crawl. "My mother?" she said, almost mocking the word. "A mother who controls everything? Who still treats me like a little girl? Please. Tyler treats me like an adult. He respects me. Something you've never done." Her words hit me like a slap. My knees felt weak, and I gripped the back of a chair just to steady myself. "Respect?" I said. "Emily, I gave you everything I had. I worked, I sacrificed." She cut me off with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Spare me the guilt trip. I don't need a lecture. What I need is for you to stop acting like you own this place. This is my home, too. Tyler belongs here. Her home. Her claim." It was like watching a stranger wear my daughter's face. And then, to twist the knife even deeper, Tyler leaned forward and said, "She's right, you know. Maybe it's time you loosened your grip. Let the girl breathe. She's not a child anymore." The arrogance in his voice made me want to scream. Who was he to walk into my house and tell me how to live with my own daughter? Who was he to sip beer on my couch, mock my clothes, and smirk at my humiliation? But Emily nodded in agreement, clinging to his words like gospel. "See? Tyler gets it. You never do." Something inside me cracked that moment. I looked at her, my daughter, the baby I had carried, the little girl I had comforted after nightmares, the teenager I had worried over when she stayed out too late, and I didn't recognize her. She had chosen him over me. Not just chosen, elevated him. Made him her authority, her voice of reason. The pain was unbearable. But layered beneath it was something else. A cold, steady anger. I straightened my shoulders, forcing myself to hold her gaze. "Emily, I don't know what's happening to you, but you will not strip me of my place in this house. Not while I'm still breathing." She scoffed. "We'll see about that." Her words weren't a threat shouted in anger. They were quiet, deliberate, the kind of promise that chills the blood. The rest of the evening passed in unbearable silence. I stayed in my room, listening to the muffled sounds of their laughter, the clinking of bottles, the television blasting some movie. At one point, I heard Tyler's voice booming down the hall, followed by Emily's giggles. The sound made me feel like an unwanted guest in my own life. When I finally managed to drift into restless sleep, my dreams were filled with fragmented images. My clothes crumpled in a garbage bag, Tyler's smirk, Emily's cold laughter. I woke with a start in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, realizing that this wasn't just a bad day. It was the beginning of something darker. Because humiliation is one thing. But once a daughter learns to laugh at her mother's pain, once she finds joy in tearing her down the line between family and enemy is erased. And I had the sinking feeling that Emily had crossed that line forever. The next morning, I walked into my kitchen and felt like a trespasser. Tyler was already there, shirtless, frying eggs, as if it were his own home. The smell of oil filled the air, the sound of the pan sizzling loud in my ears. He glanced at me casually, not a trace of shame in his expression, and said, "Morning." Emily appeared soon after, hair messy, wearing one of his oversized t-shirts. She didn't even greet me. Instead, she walked straight past me, kissed him on the cheek, and poured herself coffee from the pot I had brewed. My pot, my kitchen, my daughter. I stood there frozen, gripping the edge of the counter. Every instinct in me wanted to scream, to demand they both leave immediately. But something about the smug ease in Tyler's movements, the way he placed two plates on the table, one for himself and one for Emily, warned me that this wasn't just some overnight guest. "Emily," I said finally, my voice sharper than I intended. "What is going on? Why is he here in my kitchen like this?" She didn't even look at me. "Because he lives here now." The words hit me like ice water. "Excuse me?" She sat down, cut into the eggs Tyler had placed before her, and spoke between bites. "I said he lives here now. Tyler and I talked about it. He's moving in. You'll get used to it." I stared at her, then at him. He met my gaze calmly, chewing slowly, as if daring me to challenge him. The arrogance in his eyes was unbearable. "You don't make decisions like that without me," I said, trying to steady my trembling hands. "This is my house. My rules." "Oh." Emily laughed softly, a mocking sound that made my skin crawl. "Your house? Funny. You act like you're some queen sitting on a throne. Newsflash, Mom, you don't own me. And if I want Tyler here, he stays." I turned toward her, anger surging. "I'm not talking about owning you. I'm talking about respect. Bringing a stranger into my home without asking me, throwing away my clothes. Do you realize how cruel that is?" Her eyes hardened. "Cruel? No, Mum. Cruel is the way you've controlled me my whole life, telling me who to see, what to wear, where to go. Tyler makes me feel free. You never did." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. Had I been controlling? I thought back to the nights I'd stayed awake waiting for her, the lectures I'd given when she broke curfew, the times I'd tried to steer her away from reckless choices. I called it love. She now called it chains. But love wasn't supposed to feel like this twisting humiliation in my gut as she defended a stranger over me. Tyler leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. "Look, Mrs. Hensley," he said casually. "I know this is hard for you. But Emily's an adult now. She doesn't need your permission. Maybe it's time you learn to step back." The way he said my name, Mrs. Hensley, was deliberate, like a reminder that I wasn't even family to him. Just an obstacle. "Step back?" I repeated softly. "This is my home. And you've been here for less than a day." He smirked. "And already it feels more like home with me in it." The audacity left me speechless. My daughter giggled at his words, resting her hand on his arm as though he had said something clever. The betrayal cut so deep I had to look away. I left the kitchen without eating, my stomach in knots. In my room, I sat on the edge of my bed, head in my hands. My own daughter had just declared that a man I didn't know, a man who looked at me with contempt, belonged in my house more than I did. The day stretched on like a bad dream. I avoided them as much as I could, but their laughter echoed through every wall, their voices filling every corner of what once had been my safe place. Tyler's belongings started appearing around the house. A duffel bag in the hallway, shoes by the door, his toothbrush beside mine in the bathroom sink. It was as if he were erasing me, item by item. That evening, I finally confronted Emily again. "Emily, listen to me. This isn't right. You don't know this man. You don't know what he's after. You're throwing everything away for someone who hasn't earned an ounce of trust." Her eyes narrowed. "And you think you know better?" Maybe Tyler sees me for who I am. Maybe he gives me the respect you never gave. I shook my head. Respect doesn't mean turning me into a stranger in my own house. Respect doesn't mean laughing while your mother stands shivering, humiliated, in front of a stranger. For a moment, I thought my words might break through. Her face softened slightly, but then Tyler walked into the room. She looked at him, then at me, and her expression hardened again. "Enough, Mom," she said. "If you can't accept him, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." The silence that followed was deafening. My heart pounded in my chest, the weight of her words pressing down on me. Did my own daughter just suggest I didn't belong in my own home? That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about Tyler moving in. It wasn't about my clothes, or the kitchen, or even the laughter. It was about power. Emily and Tyler weren't just living here. They were trying to push me out. And the worst part? My daughter was the one leading the charge. Have you ever been in a situation like this? If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. The next few days blurred together in a haze of unease. My house, once filled with my routines and quiet comforts, felt alien. The sound of Tyler's voice replaced the silence I once cherished. The sight of Emily not as my daughter but as someone's accomplice cut deeper every time she looked at me with disdain. One afternoon, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from a half-finished cup of tea. I could hear them laughing in the living room. Their laughter wasn't joyous. It was sharp, mocking, as if I were the joke that entertained them. Finally, I couldn't bear it any longer. I stood and walked into the living room. Emily sat on the couch with Tyler's arm draped casually over her shoulders. They both looked up when I entered, but only Tyler smirked. Emily's expression was unreadable, cold, guarded. "Emily," I said softly, but firmly. "We need to talk." She sighed as though the very idea of speaking to me was a burden. "About what, Mom? Haven't we been over this already?" "Not like this," I said. My voice trembled, but I forced myself to meet her eyes. "I want to understand. Why are you doing this? Why humiliate me? Why bring a stranger into our home without even asking me?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, I thought she might actually answer, but when she finally spoke, her voice was cutting. "Because I'm tired of living under your shadow. My whole life, it's been about what you think, what you want, what you say is right. You never asked me what I wanted. You never gave me space. Tyler gives me that. He makes me feel like I'm someone not just your daughter, not just an extension of you. He makes me feel real." I stared at her, stunned. "Emily, I never wanted to control you. Everything I did, the rules, the warnings, the boundaries, it was to protect you. I didn't want you to make mistakes that would hurt you." Her laugh was bitter, hollow. "Protect me? Number. You wanted to own me. You always think you know best, but you don't. You never have." Her words sliced through me. Memories flooded my mind, the countless times I'd sacrificed for her. The nights I'd stayed awake by her bedside when she was sick. The hours I worked to afford her school supplies, her clothes, her dreams, and now she was dismissing it all as ownership. "I gave up so much for you," I whispered. "I thought love meant guiding you, giving you structure." "Love?" she snapped. "Love isn't control. Love isn't smothering someone until they can't breathe. Tyler understands that. You don't." Tyler squeezed her shoulder, his smirk deepening, as if her words were a victory for him. His presence felt like poison, seeping into every corner of my daughter's soul. I swallowed hard. "And what about respect? Does humiliating me show respect? Does laughing while I stood there, stripped of dignity, show love?" Emily's gaze flickered, just for a second, as if doubt had crossed her mind. But then it vanished. She straightened, her voice colder than ever. "You make everything about you. Always the victim, always the martyr. Maybe I'm not the problem here. Maybe you are." He was. The words echoed in my ears, like a sentence being passed. For a moment, I felt my knees weaken. It wasn't just Tyler driving this wedge. It was Emily herself, wielding her bitterness like a blade. I turned toward him, my anger slipping through. And you? What have you given her? What have you done to deserve this blind loyalty? He leaned forward, eyes glinting with arrogance. I gave her freedom. Something you never did. And unlike you, I don't make her feel small. I wanted to scream, to shake Emily, and make her see the manipulation. But I realized something chilling she didn't want to see. She was choosing this. For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. My breath felt heavy in my chest. Finally, I said, Emily, I may not be perfect, but I am your mother, and I will not let a stranger erase me from your life, from my own home. I won't. She stood, her face inches from mine, eyes blazing. Then maybe you should start getting used to being alone. Because Tyler is here to stay, and if you can't accept that, maybe you don't belong here anymore. Her words didn't just hurt, they hollowed me out. To hear my own child suggest I didn't belong in the home I had built, the home I had sacrificed for, was almost too much to bear. I turned and walked back to my room, my vision blurred with tears. I closed the door behind me and collapsed onto the bed, clutching a pillow to my chest. For the first time in years, I cried like a child, not from sadness alone, but from the piercing grief of betrayal. Because Emily wasn't just drifting away from me, she was pushing me out. Deliberately. And Tyler's shadow loomed over every cruel word she spoke. That night, as I lay awake listening to their muffled laughter down the hall, a chilling truth settled over me. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't rebellion. This was war. The morning after our confrontation, I walked into the kitchen to find something that twisted my stomach into knots. Tyler sat at the head of the table, my chair, with Emily serving him a plate of pancakes. She laughed at something he said, her voice light and free, in a way I hadn't heard in years. It should have been a sweet sound. But instead, it felt like salt ground into a wound. I stood silently in the doorway, watching them. When Emily finally noticed me, she smiled, but not with warmth. It was a sharp, pointed smile, almost daring me to interrupt. "Good morning, Mom," she said, her tone dripping with false cheer. "I was just telling Tyler that we should start doing family breakfasts like this more often." The word family caught in my ears. I forced a breath and stepped into the room. "Family breakfasts?" I repeated. "Emily, he isn't family." She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms, her smile widening. "That's where you're wrong. Tyler is family now. He's part of my life, and this house, whether you like it or not." My pulse quickened. "Emily, you barely know him. How can you call him family? Do you have any idea what kind of man he really is?" Her eyes narrowed. "I know enough. I know that he makes me happy. I know that he respects me. That's more than I can say for you." The words slammed into me like a blow. "Respect?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Is respect watching you throw away your mother's clothes? Is it mocking me in my own home?" Tyler finally spoke, leaning back with an infuriating calmness. "Maybe what she means, Mrs. Hensley, is that I don't suffocate her. I let her make her own choices. I don't treat her like a child." I turned to him, fury burning in my chest. "You've known her for what, weeks? Months? And you think you've earned the right to redefine her life? To sit there and lecture me on motherhood?" He smirked, sipping his coffee. "Seems like she agrees with me. That's all that matters, isn't it?" Emily placed her hand over his, her gaze locked on me. "Yes, Mom. That's all that matters." The finality in her tone made my stomach twist. She wasn't just defending him. She was planting a flag, declaring a side, and it wasn't mine. I sat down slowly, my hands trembling against the wood of the table. "Emily," I whispered. "You're my daughter, My only child. I have stood by you through everything. Please, don't let this man come between us. For just a moment, I thought I saw her hesitate. Her eyes softened, as though some part of her still remembered who I was. But then Tyler squeezed her hand, and her gaze turned cold again. I'm not letting him come between us, Mom, she said quietly. You are, because you can't accept that he's here, that he belongs. The words sliced through me. He belongs. I looked at him again, really looked at him. His eyes weren't warm. They weren't protective. They were calculating, measuring. And in that moment, I realized his smirk wasn't confidence. It was strategy. He was staking a claim, not just on Emily, but on everything that was mine. The rest of breakfast passed in silence. I barely touched my food. Emily and Tyler chatted as if I weren't there, planning trips, laughing at inside jokes, weaving themselves into a world that excluded me completely. Afterward, I retreated to my bedroom. I sat on the edge of my bed, my body trembling with rage and sorrow. For years, I had been Emily's anchor, and now she was treating me like dead weight, eager to cut me loose. But beneath the despair, something else stirred a cold, simmering anger. I could feel it hardening inside me, like steel. If Emily wanted to call Tyler family, if she wanted to hand him authority in this house, then fine, let her. But I knew something she didn't. Family built on lies never lasts. And I would be there, silent and watchful, when the cracks began to show. I pressed my hands together, steadying my breath. This wasn't the end. It couldn't be. Because no matter how hard they tried to push me out, I was still her mother. And I wasn't going to disappear quietly. Not for Emily, and certainly not for him. It started small, almost unnoticeable little things that could have been brushed off as forgetfulness or coincidence. But I knew better. One evening, I went to my dresser to change into my favorite cardigan, the one my late mother had knitted for me. The drawer was empty. I searched the closet, the laundry basket, even under the bed. It was gone. When I asked Emily, she barely looked up from her phone. Oh, that old thing? I donated it. You're welcome. Have. Her voice was casual, as if she'd done me a favor. My chest tightened. That sweater wasn't just clothing. It was memory, heritage, love woven into every thread. And she had tossed it away without a second thought. Days later, I noticed more items missing. My good pair of shoes. A box of old photographs. Even some of my jewelry, inexpensive but precious to me. Each disappearance chipped away at me. Not because of the material value, but because it was mine. My life, my past, being erased piece by piece. I confronted Emily in the hallway. Why are you doing this? Why are my things disappearing? She smirked, her phone still in hand. Mom, you have too much junk. Tyler and I are just helping you clear space. You should be grateful. Grateful? My voice cracked. Grateful that you're throwing away my life without asking me? That you're stripping me of everything I own? Her expression hardened. Maybe if you learned to let go, you wouldn't be so bitter all the time. I stood there trembling, unable to find words strong enough to pierce through her cruelty. She walked past me, brushing my shoulder deliberately, leaving me shaking with fury. It didn't stop there. Soon, I discovered the door to the linen closet locked. The spare key I always kept on the hook was gone. When I asked about it, Tyler answered this time. We needed more space for our things, he said smoothly. You don't mind, right? The audacity left me speechless. My house was slowly transforming into theirs. One night, I tried to enter the guest room where I kept extra boxes, family albums, letters, keepsakes from years gone by. The door wouldn't budge. A new lock gleamed on the knob. My heart dropped. I stormed into the living room where they sat watching television. Why is the guest room locked? I demanded. Emily glanced at Tyler, then at me, her eyes gleaming with defiance. Because we need privacy. That's our room now. My voice trembled with rage. Your room? That's my home. Every corner of it. You don't just claim rooms that aren't yours. She rolled her eyes. God, Mom, you're impossible. Why do you care so much about things? About space? You're acting paranoid. I felt the blood rush to my face. Paranoid? You've thrown away my clothes, locked away my belongings, stolen my rooms, and you expect me to be silent? Tyler leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His calm tone was more unnerving than if he'd shouted. Mrs. Hensley, maybe you're overreacting. We're just trying to make this place livable for everyone. If you can't adapt, that's not our fault. His words dripped with false reasonableness, but the smug look in his eyes betrayed him. He knew exactly what he was doing. That night, I sat in my bedroom, the only space left untouched, though I knew it was only a matter of time. The walls felt smaller, pressing in on me. My own house, once a sanctuary, had become a prison. I walked to the window and stared out at the quiet, suburban street. Families were settling in for the night, children laughing, lights flickering on in warm kitchens. And here I was, locked away, shut out by the very daughter I had raised. I whispered to myself, "Why, Emily? Why are you doing this to me?" But there was no answer, only the muffled laughter of my daughter and the stranger who now controlled her. For the first time, a chilling thought crossed my mind. Maybe they weren't just trying to humiliate me. Maybe they were trying to erase me completely. I pressed a hand to my chest, my heart pounding against my ribs. The fear was suffocating, but beneath it, a spark of anger flickered. They thought they could strip me of everything, my clothes, my rooms, my dignity, until nothing was left. But they had forgotten something. They hadn't stripped me of my mind, and I intended to use it. That night, I began writing in a small notebook I kept hidden in my drawer. Every missing item, every locked door, every cruel word, dates, times, details. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Because if Emily and Tyler thought they could turn me into a ghost in my own house, they were mistaken. I would not vanish quietly. I couldn't keep the storm bottled inside me any longer. Watching my daughter lock away my belongings and hand over my house piece by piece was unbearable. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, if I reached her heart, if I reminded her of who we used to be, I could break through this cold mask she had put on. So one evening, I gathered the courage to sit with them in the living room. Tyler lounged on the couch, legs sprawled out like a king on his throne, while Emily curled against him, her head resting on his shoulder. The sight made my chest tighten. She used to curl against me that way when thunder scared her as a child. Now I was the thunder she wanted to silence. I sat down across from them, my hands folded tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking. Emily, I began softly. I need you to listen to me. Just listen. For a moment. No interruptions. Please. She exchanged a glance with Tyler, then rolled her eyes. Fine. Go ahead, Mom. Say whatever you need to say. I drew a deep breath. Do you remember when you were 7 and you came home crying because the other kids laughed at your shoes? They were hand-me-downs, and you begged me for new ones. I didn't have the money, but I worked extra shifts. I went without lunch for weeks so you could walk into school with shoes you were proud of. Do you remember that? Emily's face flickered a tiny shadow of recognition, of memory. I pressed on. And the nights you were sick? I sat by your bed for hours, wiping your forehead, whispering lullabies until you slept. Or when you wanted to join the dance team but thought we couldn't afford the costumes. I sold my jewelry, Emily. I sold my wedding ring so you could dance. How'd? My throat tightened, tears pressing at the corners of my eyes. Everything I have done, every sacrifice I made, it was for you. Because I love you. Because you are my daughter. How can you look at me now and treat me like a stranger? Like an enemy? The silence that followed was heavy, stretching across the room like a taut string ready to snap. Emily shifted slightly, her expression unreadable. I hoped I had reached her. But then Tyler chuckled, low, mocking, cruel. Wow, he said, smirking. Quite the performance. You should have been an actress, Mrs. Hensley. All that sacrifice, all that love, and yet here we are. Guess it wasn't enough. Emily laughed with him. The sound was like glass shattering inside my chest. She looked at me, eyes cold. You really think listing off sacrifices makes you a saint? That I should bow down and worship you for giving me shoes and dance lessons? That doesn't erase how suffocating you were. How you never let me breathe. I stared at her, my heart pounding. Emily, that's not true. I never. Don't. Her voice was sharp, cutting me off. You never trusted me. You never believed in me. Everything you call love was just control. Tyler showed me that. And you know what? He's right. You're not my savior, Mom. You're my jailer. Her words were daggers, and she twisted each one. My body trembled, not just with grief, but with fury I struggled to contain. You sit there, I whispered, my voice trembling, and you mock me in front of a stranger, a man you've known for what months? While I, the woman who raised you, who gave everything for you, sit here humiliated? Emily, do you even hear yourself? She crossed her arms, smirking. I hear myself just fine. Maybe you should start listening too. Tyler leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his grin widening. You know, Mrs. Hensley, maybe this is what happens when someone can't let go. Kids grow up. They don't need their mom hovering over them forever. Emily doesn't need you anymore. Not when she has me. The audacity of his words left me trembling. My fists clenched in my lap, nails digging into my skin. Emily laughed again, tilting her head against his shoulder. See, Mom? He gets it. He understands me in ways you never could. I wanted to scream, to shake her until the spell broke, until she saw the truth that this man was poisoning her against me. But instead, I sat frozen, every nerve in my body burning with rage. Finally, I stood. My legs shook, but my voice carried steel. Emily, one day you'll realize the truth. One day you'll see that this man doesn't love you, he's using you. And when that day comes, I pray you haven't thrown away everything for him. Her face hardened, her eyes flashing. Get out of my face, Mom. Just go. But the dismissal cut deep. My chest felt hollow as I turned and walked back to my room, their laughter chasing me down the hallway like a haunting echo. Behind the closed door, I collapsed onto my bed, trembling violently. I pressed my fist to my mouth to stifle the sob that tore from my throat. It was no use appealing to her heart. She had chosen him, chosen cruelty, chosen to mock everything I had ever done for her. But as I lay there in the dark, a new resolve began to form. If I couldn't reach her with love, then I would fight in silence. Because I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman who had been humiliated in her own home, and I would not let it continue. That night, after Emily's laughter had faded into the walls, and Tyler's heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, I sat in the dark with only the small lamp on my nightstand, illuminating my notebook. My hands trembled as I wrote, the pen scratching across the paper in urgent strokes. I had begged. I had reasoned. I had poured out my heart. And still my daughter looked at me with nothing but contempt. No more pleading. No more humiliating myself in front of Tyler. It was time I stopped fighting with words that fell on deaf ears and started preparing for the storm that I could feel building. So, I documented everything. Day 1. My cardigan missing. Emily admitted she threw it away. Day 2. Guest room locked. Tyler says it's their room now. Day 3. My jewelry box lighter than before. Suspect items stolen. Each line felt like a small reclamation of control. If they thought they could erase me piece by piece, they underestimated me. I might be cornered, but I wasn't powerless. The more I wrote, the clearer my mind became. I remembered my years as a teacher, the patience I had cultivated with difficult students, the ability to observe patterns, to notice details. Tyler thought his smirk and arrogance could intimidate me, but he didn't know that behind my silence, I was studying him. I started noticing little things, the way his eyes darted toward my purse whenever I left it unattended, how Emily, once careless with money, suddenly carried wads of cash, the whispered conversations that stopped whenever I entered the room. One evening, I stood outside Emily's door, my heart pounding. Their voices were low, conspiratorial. Her savings, Tyler said. She keeps it in the drawer by her bed. I checked. I froze, my blood running cold. Emily's voice followed, hesitant but sharp. Don't worry, she'll give us access sooner or later. She won't even see it coming. I pressed my hand against my chest to keep from gasping. They weren't just mocking me. They weren't just humiliating me. They were planning to take everything. I retreated silently to my room, locking the door, my body trembling. I clutched my notebook like a lifeline, my pen scratching furiously as I added the new revelation. They're after my savings. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't imagination. It was fact. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying Emily's words. She'll give us access sooner or later. Not if I could help it. The next day, I quietly moved my savings. It wasn't much, just the sum of years of careful budgeting, small sacrifices, things set aside for emergencies. Enough to matter. Enough for Tyler to want it. I hid the money where neither of them would think to look, in the bottom of an old flour tin in the pantry, beneath a layer of unused bags. As I closed the lid, a strange calmness washed over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of control. But control wasn't enough. I needed proof. So I started leaving small traps. I left my purse in the living room, deliberately unzipped, with a few marked bills tucked inside. The next morning, one was missing. I wrote it down, the date and time. Later, I noticed my phone charger gone, only to spot Tyler using it in the living room. Another note in the book. I became an observer in my own house, every detail etched onto those pages. Their laughter no longer pierced me as deeply, because I knew I was building something stronger than anger. I was building a case. One evening, Emily caught me writing. "What's that?" she asked sharply, eyeing the notebook. I snapped it shut. "Just notes," I said quickly. She narrowed her eyes, suspicion flashing across her face. "Notes about what?" "Recipes," I lied smoothly. She stared at me for a long moment, before shrugging and turning away. But I could feel the tension, the shift in the air. She was watching me now. That only made me more careful. At night, I slid the notebook beneath my mattress. During the day, I kept it tucked in the bottom of my laundry basket. Every entry was a piece of the puzzle. Every observation a step closer to the truth I would one day reveal. And yet, even as I wrote, I couldn't silence the ache in my chest. This was my daughter, my Emily, the child I had held in my arms, whose hair I had braided, whose future I had dreamed of shaping with love and care. How had she become this? How had she turned into someone who would laugh at my humiliation, who would conspire with a stranger to rob me blind? Sometimes I stared at her when she wasn't looking, searching for a flicker of the girl I once knew. But all I saw was the coldness in her eyes, the reflection of Tyler's influence. I told myself I was gathering evidence for survival. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was gathering evidence for judgment, because one day soon, their smirks would falter, their laughter would die in their throats, and when that day came, I would be ready. The whispers grew bolder. They no longer bothered to hide them when they thought I was asleep. My house had turned into a den of conspirators, their voices crawling under my door like smoke in the night. One evening, I crept down the hallway, my heart hammering. Their laughter drifted from the living room. I stopped just shy of the doorway, pressing my back against the wall. Once we get access to her account, it's over, Tyler was saying, his voice smug, confident. She's too old-fashioned, probably doesn't even know how to check her balance online. Emily giggled, a sound that once would have melted me, but now pierced me like a knife. You're terrible, she said, though her tone was laced with approval. But you're right. She's gullible. Always has been. She won't even see it coming. What? My stomach twisted. Gullible. Always has been. Words from my own daughter's mouth. Tyler leaned closer. I could hear the shift in his voice, low and conspiratorial. Think about it, babe. The house, the savings, all of it could be ours. We just have to push her hard enough. She'll break, she'll give in, and then… The sound of him snapping his fingers made my heart drop. And then… Emily repeated softly. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle the gasp that threatened to escape. My knees felt weak, but my anger kept me rooted to the spot. They weren't just humiliating me. They weren't just mocking me. They were planning my erasure. Piece by piece, dollar by dollar, brick by brick. I slipped back into my room and locked the door, my body trembling. My hands shook as I pulled out the notebook from beneath my mattress. With each line I wrote, my fury sharpened into clarity. They are plotting to steal everything. My home, my savings, my life. I stared at the words until the ink blurred. The ache in my chest was almost unbearable. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a death sentence for everything I had worked for, everything I had built. I thought of Emily as a child, clutching my hand on her first day of school, her small fingers trusting me to guide her. I thought of her teenage years, when she came home crying after heartbreak, and I held her until she fell asleep. And now, those same hands were reaching for the knife that would cut me down. The grief was suffocating, but underneath, something darker stirred. A resolve I hadn't felt in years. They thought I was weak. They thought my silence was surrender. But silence can also be strategy. I began to plan. I called my sister one afternoon, speaking softly in the garden where I knew Emily and Tyler wouldn't overhear. I need you to hold on to something for me, I whispered, slipping an envelope of documents into her hands later that day. Copies of my bank records, a notarized statement, and the beginnings of the journal I had been keeping. She didn't ask questions. She saw the fear in my eyes and simply nodded. At home, I carried on, as though nothing had changed. I let them laugh. I let them sneer. I let them believe I was broken. But in the shadows, I was preparing. I watched more carefully now. Tyler had a habit of leaving receipts in his pockets. When he carelessly tossed his jeans over the couch, I quietly retrieved one. Liquor store, ATM withdrawals, all on cash that I suspected wasn't his. Emily was no better. She had started wearing new clothes, expensive ones, though she hadn't worked a day in months. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages she tried to hide from me. I noted it all down. The notebook had become my weapon, each page a blade, each word a bullet. One day, I promised myself, I would place it in front of them and watch their faces as their lies unraveled. But I wouldn't do it privately. No humiliation deserved an audience. One evening, as I lay awake listening to their muffled laughter from down the hall, I pressed the notebook to my chest and whispered into the darkness. You think you're clever. You think you're untouchable. But when I reveal what you've done… I closed my eyes, the image searing into my mind. Emily's face crumbling, Tyler's smirk wiped clean, the world seeing them for who they truly were. How do you think they will react when I reveal that to everyone? The family gathering was supposed to be mine. A small dinner, nothing grand, just my sister, her husband, and a couple of cousins I hadn't seen in months. I had been looking forward to it, hoping for a few hours of normalcy. A reminder that I wasn't completely alone in this world. But Emily and Tyler had other plans. From the moment my sister stepped through the door, I felt the shift. Emily had dressed to impress, wearing a sleek dress I knew she hadn't bought with her own money. Tyler hovered near her, his arm possessively wrapped around her waist, grinning as if he owned not only my daughter but the entire evening. "Margaret," my sister said, embracing me warmly. But as we pulled apart, her eyes flicked to Emily and Tyler. Confusion clouded her expression. "Oh, I didn't know you had company." "They live here now," Emily announced before I could speak. Her voice was light, casual, but every word carried venom. I froze. My sister's brow furrowed, but before she could ask, Tyler chuckled. "Yeah, Margaret's been kind enough to let us stay. She's been struggling to manage things around here, and we're helping out, taking care of her." Bye. The implication was clear. Helpless, dependent, old. My throat tightened. "That's not—" I began, but Emily cut me off. "Mom's been having difficulties lately," she said smoothly. "Forgetting things, losing track of stuff. Tyler and I thought it was best if we stepped in." The room spun. My own daughter, in front of family, painting me as weak, as incompetent. I caught my sister's eyes wide, searching, but she said nothing, perhaps unsure what to believe. Tyler, sensing the advantage, poured her a glass of wine and continued. "It's been hard on all of us, but we're managing. Thankfully, Emily's strong enough to handle it." They were weaving their story, thread by thread, binding me into a narrative of helplessness. As the evening wore on, the humiliations multiplied. At dinner, Emily took the carving knife from my hand. "Careful, Mom. You might hurt yourself," she said loudly, smirking as Tyler chuckled. When I misplaced the salt shaker for a moment, she leaned across the table. "See what I mean?" she told my cousin. "It's like this all the time." My face burned. Every laugh, every sideways glance from family, felt like a dagger. I wanted to scream, to stand up and shout the truth. That they were the manipulators, the thieves, the cruel ones. But I bit my tongue, because I had already decided. Their downfall would not come from my rage. It would come from their own arrogance. So I played along. I smiled weakly when they joked. I let Emily speak over me. Let Tyler dominate the conversation. I let my family leave with whispers in their eyes, uncertainty clouding their trust. And when the door closed behind them, I retreated to my room, my hands shaking. For hours, I sat at my desk, staring at my notebook. Each entry felt heavier now, more urgent. It wasn't just evidence anymore, it was my lifeline, my only defense against the lies they were planting. I wrote down everything from the evening. Emily's public claim, "They live here now," Tyler's false narrative, taking care of me because I'm struggling, humiliations at dinner. Every detail mattered. Because one day, when I put this in front of the right people, they would see. But that night, as I closed the book and set it back under the mattress, a new thought took root. They weren't just trying to humiliate me, they were building a case. Preparing others to see me as unstable, unreliable, unfit. And if I didn't move faster, if I didn't strike before their lies hardened into truth, I might lose more than my dignity. I might lose my home. The thought chilled me to the bone. But it also lit a fire inside me. They thought they were clever, staging scenes and whispering poison into the ears of family. But they didn't know me as well as they thought. I had spent a lifetime surviving storms they couldn't imagine. Raising a child alone. Working double shifts. Bearing humiliation quietly, while pushing forward. This wasn't the first time I had been underestimated. And it wouldn't be the last time I proved someone wrong. That night, lying awake in the silence after their laughter had faded, I whispered to myself, "Play your game, Emily. Play it well, Tyler. Because when I reveal the truth, it won't just be in whispers. It will be in a room full of witnesses. And you won't laugh then." I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone anymore. For weeks, I had been silent, swallowing my humiliation, documenting everything while my daughter and that man carved pieces out of my life. But after the family dinner, After hearing Emily twist reality so easily, painting me as weak, forgetful, incapable, I understood the danger more clearly than ever. They weren't just trying to break me, they were preparing to erase me. And if I didn't act now, if I let them weave their story unchecked, the day would come when even those who loved me would believe their lies. That thought terrified me more than anything, so I reached out. It was a Saturday morning when I called my sister again. I had barely slept. My voice shook when she answered, but I forced myself to sound steady. "Can you come by? Alone?" She hesitated for only a moment. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "No," I whispered, "but I need you to see something." When she arrived, Emily and Tyler had just left for groceries. I ushered her quickly into my bedroom, locking the door behind us like I was harboring state secrets. I pulled the notebook from beneath the mattress, my hands trembling, and placed it on the bed between us. "What's this?" she asked, eyes soft, cautious. "My life," I said, "or what's left of it." I flipped through the pages, showing her entry after entry, the missing belongings, the locked doors, the lies whispered behind my back. I recounted the dinner, Emily's cruel words, Tyler's manipulations. With every page, her face grew tighter, her lips pressed into a thin line. When I reached the most recent entry, the overheard conversation about my savings, my house, I stopped, my throat thick with emotion. "They're planning to take everything," I whispered. "And Emily, my Emily, she's helping him." For a long moment, my sister said nothing. She just stared at the notebook, at my desperate handwriting bleeding across the pages. Finally, she looked at me, her eyes wet. "Margaret," she said softly, "why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I wanted to believe it would stop, that Emily would come to her senses, that if I was patient, if I showed her love." My voice cracked. "But it's only gotten worse. And now I don't know who to trust. If she's willing to lie to family, to make me look unstable." Her hand closed over mine, firm, grounding. "You can trust me. You always can." Relief flooded me, though it was tinged with shame. I hated needing help, hated exposing my wounds so vulnerably, but there was no other choice. "I need you to hold on to copies of this," I said, sliding an envelope toward her. "If something happens to me, if they try to push me out, I want you to have proof." Her jaw tightened. "Nothing is going to happen to you. Not if I can help it." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. But I also knew that hope alone wasn't enough. That evening, Emily noticed something different in me. She eyed me suspiciously across the kitchen, her gaze sharp. "You've been quiet," she said, almost accusing. "I've had a lot on my mind," I replied evenly, pouring myself tea. Her lips curled. "About what?" "How to make me look bad again." I met her eyes. For once, I didn't flinch. "No, Emily. About how far you've fallen. And how blind you've become." "Oh," her nostrils flared, but before she could snap back, Tyler entered the room, his presence filling the space like smoke. "Everything all right here?" he asked smoothly, though his eyes were cold. "Just fine," I said, turning away, hiding the small, secret satisfaction of knowing that for once, I wasn't the one on the defensive. They didn't know I had allies now. Over the next week, I reached out to 2 more relatives quietly. My cousin, the one who had been at the dinner, had seen enough doubt in her eyes that I knew she'd listen. When I showed her excerpts from my notebook, her face went pale. "So that's why Emily kept talking over you," she murmured. I thought something felt off. Each time I revealed a piece of my truth, I felt stronger. The web Emily and Tyler were spinning began to fray at the edges. But with each step forward, the danger grew. Tyler wasn't stupid. He sensed shifts in the air, the subtle change in how I carried myself. One evening, he cornered me in the hallway, his body blocking the light. "You've been busy," he said casually, but his eyes glittered with menace. My heart thudded, but I forced my face into calm. "I don't know what you're talking about." He leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear. Don't play games with me, Margaret. You're not as clever as you think. Whatever you're planning, it won't work. Wuh. I stepped back, my hands trembling but my voice steady. We'll see. His smirk faltered just slightly enough to give me strength. That night, I wrote in my notebook with renewed fury. He knows. He senses it. But he doesn't know everything. Because what Tyler didn't realize was that I wasn't just collecting words anymore. My sister had advised me to start recording. So I had hidden a small device, a cheap voice recorder under the couch cushions, and within days, it captured what I needed. Tyler talking openly about my bank account, about bleeding the old woman dry. Emily's laughter, her agreement. Clear as day. When I played it back alone in my room, my hands shook with both grief and triumph. Hearing her voice, my own daughters conspiring against me, was a wound deeper than words. But it was also evidence. Unshakable, undeniable evidence. I cried that night, not just for the betrayal, but for the vindication. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't the unstable woman they wanted the world to see. I was a mother under attack, and I was fighting back. Still, I knew timing was everything. To expose them too soon would risk them twisting the narrative again. I needed an audience. I needed witnesses. So I waited. Patiently. Painfully. I smiled through clenched teeth at dinner, ignored their jabs, endured their laughter. I let them believe I was beaten because I wanted their arrogance at its peak when I struck. And every night, as I lay awake, I whispered to myself, soon, soon they'll see the truth. Soon everyone will know. The question wasn't if I would reveal them. The question was how. And when the moment came, it would be a reckoning neither Emily nor Tyler could escape. The day of reckoning didn't arrive by accident. I chose it. I knew I couldn't afford another quiet confrontation in the kitchen, another round of Emily's cold laughter and Tyler's smug smirk. I needed witnesses, people who could see with their own eyes and hear with their own ears. If I was going to end this nightmare, I had to make sure no one could twist the truth afterward. So I planned. It was my sister who gave me the idea. One evening, as we spoke in hushed tones over the phone, she said, "If they're making you look weak in front of family, then you need to make them look guilty in front of family. Turn their weapon against them." Her words sparked something in me. That weekend, I invited relatives and a few trusted neighbors for a small gathering, a casual dinner under the pretense of reconnecting. Emily and Tyler were thrilled, thinking they had won. Emily announced to Tyler in front of me that it would be the perfect chance to show everyone how she and her boyfriend were taking care of Mom. I bit back my smile, because this time, I was ready. The house was warm with voices when the evening arrived. My sister, my cousin, a neighbor from 2 doors down, even my old friend from church, they gathered around my dining table, sipping wine and chatting. Emily flitted about, dressed elegantly, her laughter ringing too loudly, too eagerly. Tyler played host, shaking hands, telling stories as if he owned the house. I kept my composure, pouring tea, greeting guests. My heart thundered in my chest, but my face betrayed nothing. It began predictably. Emily, with her bright smile and carefully chosen words, painting me as the struggling mother. "Mom's been having a rough time," she said, her tone dripping with false concern. "But Tyler and I have been stepping up, helping out with everything. She needs us," Tyler added smoothly. "It hasn't been easy, but family means sacrifice, right?" I caught the look in my cousin's eyes, doubt flickering again. My sister's lips pressed tightly together. I knew they were waiting for me to crumble, to remain silent as I always had. But not tonight. When the plates were cleared and the room settled, I stood. My legs trembled, but my voice rang steady. "I want to thank you all for coming," I began, my gaze sweeping the room. "It means more than you know to have people I trust gathered here. Because tonight, There are things I need to say, things I can't keep hidden anymore. Emily stiffened, her fork clinking against her plate. Tyler's smirk faltered, just slightly. What are you talking about, Mom? Emily asked, her voice strained. I looked at her, then at Tyler. About the truth. About what's been happening in this house. I reached into my bag and pulled out the notebook. The room went still. This is my record, I said, holding it up. Every missing item. Every humiliation. Every word whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. Emily laughed nervously. Mom, please. Not this again. You're embarrassing yourself. But I cut her off. For the first time in months, I had the power. I opened the notebook and began to read aloud. Day 3. My jewelry missing. Day 5. Guest room locked, claimed by Emily and Tyler. Day 7. Conversation overheard about my savings. Plan to take my home. Gasps rippled across the table. My sister's eyes burned into Emily. My neighbor shook her head slowly. Disbelief etched into her face. Tyler tried to laugh. This is ridiculous. She's just confused. Making up stories. Am I? I asked sharply. My hands shook, but I pressed on. Because I have proof. I reached into the second envelope, my fingers brushing the cold edge of the recorder. My chest heaved as I pressed play. The room filled with voices. Emily's laughter. Tyler's low whisper. Her savings. She'll give us access sooner or later. She won't even see it coming. The house. All of it could be ours. She's gullible. Always has been. The words rang out like a verdict, echoing through the stunned silence. Emily's face drained of color. Tyler's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic. My sister stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. Emily. How could you? Emily stammered, her voice shaking. That's not what it sounds like. Then what is it? My cousin demanded. Because it sounds exactly like what your mother wrote down. Like you were plotting to steal from her. From your own mother. Bye. Tyler tried to recover, his voice louder now, desperate. This is taken out of context. You can't. Enough, I said, my voice cutting through the room. I turned to Emily, my heart shattering, even as my anger surged. I gave you everything. My years, my sacrifices, my love. And this is what you repay me with? Humiliation, theft, a scheme to take the only home we've ever had? Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't look away. You didn't just betray me, Emily. You betrayed yourself. Ren. Emily shook her head, her hands trembling. Mom, please. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. I understand that the daughter I raised has chosen cruelty over compassion. Lies over truth. Him over me. The silence was unbearable. My sister's sobs broke it, her voice filled with rage. Margaret, we won't let them get away with this. Everyone here heard it. Everyone knows now. Neighbors nodded. Friends murmured agreement. The room was alive with condemnation, with shock, with judgment, but not against me, against them. For the first time, Emily and Tyler were exposed. Tyler stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. This is insane. We don't have to sit here and take this. He grabbed Emily's arm, but she pulled away, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Emily, I said softly, almost pleading. Look at them. Look at the faces of the people who love you. Do you see what you've done? Do you see how far you've fallen? Her lips parted, but no words came. Tyler tugged at her again, muttering under his breath, but the spell had broken. The audience he thought he could charm had turned against him. They left that night in silence, their footsteps heavy on the porch. The door slammed, the sound reverberating through my chest like thunder. And just like that, the house was quiet. I sank into a chair, exhausted, trembling, tears streaming freely now. My sister rushed to my side, her arms wrapping around me. It's over, Margaret, she whispered. It's finally over. But as I sat there, surrounded by witnesses who had seen the truth, I knew something deeper. It wasn't truly over. Not yet. Because humiliation doesn't heal in a single night. Betrayal doesn't vanish with a single revelation. But it was the first step. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The house was silent after they left. Silent in a way that felt heavy. Not peaceful. Like the air itself was mourning what had been lost. I sat at the table, long after the others had gone, staring at the empty plates, the faint outline of wine stains on the tablecloth. My sister had urged me to rest. My cousin had kissed my cheek. The neighbors had promised to support me if anything happened next. But I couldn't move. My body was exhausted. Yet my mind was restless. For weeks, I had been fighting a war within my own walls. And though tonight had ended with their humiliation, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like ashes. I walked slowly through the rooms. The guest room door was still locked, but it no longer mattered. Tyler's shoes were still by the door, his duffel bag half unpacked in the hallway. Emily's perfume lingered faintly in the air. These traces of them clung like ghosts, reminders of the storm that had torn through my home. I gathered Tyler's belongings, one by one, and placed them on the porch. Each item felt like peeling away a layer of poison: the duffel bag, the shoes, the half-empty beer cans. Even his toothbrush tossed unceremoniously into the trash. Then came Emily's things. I hesitated. Her sweaters, her books, the framed photo of her from high school that she had left in her room. My hand trembled as I picked it up. She was smiling in the picture, eyes bright, a girl still untouched by bitterness. I whispered into the empty room. "Where did you go, Emily? Where did my daughter disappear to?" The photo blurred as tears filled my eyes. I placed it back on the dresser and closed the door gently. I couldn't throw away everything of hers. Not yet. Some part of me still clung to the hope that the girl in that photo might return someday. Back in the living room, I sank into my chair, the silence pressing against me. The weight of betrayal is a peculiar thing. It doesn't crash down all at once. It seeps into your bones, into your breath, into the way you look at every corner of the house that once held warmth. I thought of Emily as a child, of her laughter echoing through these same walls, of the nights we baked cookies together, of the mornings I braided her hair before school. And then I thought of her standing in this same room, smirking while I stood shivering in a towel, mocking me with the man who sought to take everything from me. The contrast was unbearable. And yet, despite everything, my heart ached not with hatred, but with grief. Grief for the daughter I had lost, though she was still alive. In the days that followed, the house slowly returned to me. I unlocked the guest room and found my belongings shoved into boxes, my photographs crumpled, my keepsakes tossed carelessly into corners. I spent hours restoring order, wiping away the fingerprints of their intrusion. The notebook remained on my nightstand, a testament to my endurance. I flipped through its pages, reading my own desperation etched in ink, and realized how close I had come to disappearing entirely. Without those words, without that evidence, perhaps no one would have believed me. And then I realized something else. I had not just survived. I had reclaimed myself. Neighbors stopped by more often now, bringing pies, offering warm smiles, asking if I needed anything. Their presence reminded me that I wasn't alone. No matter how much Emily had tried to isolate me, my sister called every day, her voice fierce with love. "You're stronger than you think," she told me. And for the first time, in a long time, I believed her. As for Emily and Tyler, they vanished from my home, but not from my thoughts. Rumors began to swirl. People whispered about the night of the gathering, about the recording I had played, about the look on Emily's face when the truth was exposed. Tyler's name surfaced in darker whispers, debts, schemes, other women he had bled dry before. I didn't chase those rumors. I didn't need to. Truth has a way of spreading on its own. But in the quiet of my evenings, as I sipped tea by the window, I found myself asking questions I couldn't answer. Would Emily ever come back? Would she ever see the truth of what she had done? Could a bond between mother and daughter survive such betrayal? I didn't know. What I did know was this: I couldn't let the pain define me. I couldn't let the image of her cruelty erase the years of love that had come before. Both were true, both existed, and I would carry both the love and the betrayal for the rest of my life. One evening, I stood on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The air was cool, and for the first time in months, I felt peace settling over me. The house behind me was quiet, but it was mine again. I whispered into the fading light, not knowing if I was speaking to Emily, to myself, or to the universe. You tried to strip me of everything, but you forgot the one thing you can't take: my strength. Tears welled in my eyes, but they didn't fall. They weren't tears of grief anymore. They were tears of release. Because I had endured the unimaginable. And I had survived. And now, as I sit here telling you this story, I ask you, have you ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone you love most? Have you ever been humiliated in your own home, pushed toward the edge of losing everything? If you have, then you know that survival is not just about holding on. It's about rising again, piece by piece, even when your heart is shattered. That's what I did. And though I am not whole, I am here, and I will never again let betrayal silence me. The quiet hum of life has returned to my house now. The ticking clock in the living room, the kettle whistling on the stove, the creak of the floorboards at night when I move from room to room. Each sound is mine again. A reminder that I endured, that I reclaimed what was stolen. I don't know if Emily will ever return. If she does, I will face her not as the woman broken by her cruelty, but as the mother who found her strength in the ashes. This story is not just about betrayal, it's about survival, about the quiet power of refusing to disappear. And to you, listening now, if you've faced something like this, if you've been humiliated, betrayed, or silenced, know this: you are not alone. Your story matters. Your strength is deeper than you realize. If you were in my place, would you forgive, or would you take revenge? Share your truth with me. Share your story. And don't forget to subscribe to Grace's Truth for more stories like mine. Stories of pain, of survival, of finding strength when it feels impossible. Because sometimes, telling the truth is the greatest revenge of all.